It's restricted free agent madness. It's Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, and Cam Thomas all still set without deals with their teams or offers on the table from other teams, apparently. On today's episode, me and Swipe are going to talk about what's going on with the restricted free agents, and we're also going to talk about our sleepers in each of the conferences. We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On NBA Game Night, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day and every game, every night. I'm Haize, host and creator of Locked On Bulls, and I'm joined by Swiper, one of the hosts of Locked On Nuggets. What's going on, Swiper?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. How's everything with you, bro?
Definitely. We're over here working, bro. You know how it goes, man. I see you got a new show and stuff, too. We'll talk about that off air, though.
Oh, yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So we're going to start this episode off talking about the restricted free agents. So everything's kind of at a standstill, it seems like. I mean, you could throw in Quentin Grimes there as well, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, Jonathan Kuminga. It's like these four restricted free agents that all are just kind of in a holding pattern with their teams. Jake Fisher kind of dropped a little bit on it yesterday, basically saying that Kuminga is right now not taking the Golden State Warriors offer. He's pressing his agent to find other deals and still work on other deals, find other possibilities there. Nothing's really moving on Josh Giddey. Not much really talked about with Cam Thomas yet either. He was labeled as the most likely to take the qualifying offer if that's how it ends up going, though. How you feeling about all this, Swiper?
Well, I think that the NBA, because of the CBA that the NBA is currently under, everything has to be structured so perfectly around who your actual true talents are and franchise cornerstones are. And I think for the Brooklyn Nets, they don't believe that Cam Thomas is a cornerstone for their roster. That is not something that I'm saying based off reporting, but that is something that I'm alleging from what we're seeing right now. Cam Thomas, from everything that I have found, and from Jake Fisher, they have given him an extension. They're offering him an extension of about 2 years with an average annual value of $14 million and a team option on the second year. This is despite the fact that Cam last year, he played 25 games. He scored 24 points a game, 44% from the field. And I think he's proven to be a pretty good scorer, especially for the stature that he has. He's a good step back shooter, 3-point shooter. He gets doubled a lot. Some of that I think is a function of the situation that he's in and his skill set. Teams know that he's probably the highest variance option that you need to really, truly try to guard. But I think his situation is really interesting. Jonathan Kuminga, for everything that I found, Haize, he has currently a standing 1 year, $7.9 million offer from the Golden State Warriors, which is just the tender that they're offering him. Yeah. And it's just a qualifying offer. It's nothing that's going to last past that season. And so if he did take that deal, he would be looking at being an unrestricted free agent next summer. And then that way he could command a bag from whichever team that would like to make space to sign him. And I think Josh Giddey is also another player in one of these situations where, again, he's very productive from a numbers standpoint. I think he has a lot of upside as an offensive player. Defensively, obviously, he still really struggles in some ways. But the asking price for Josh Giddey apparently is somewhere between $150 to $160 million, I found, which is about $30 million a year. Apparently, the counteroffer for the Bulls has been they're willing to pay him around $20 million a year. So I think Josh Giddey, as it appears, is not a franchise player, like a true one of the two cornerstone players you want to have for the Chicago Bulls. Cam Thomas, not a cornerstone for the Brooklyn Nets. And I think Jonathan Kuminga, very obviously, is not a cornerstone player for the Golden State Warriors, at least at this point in time, even though he's very young. I mean, Haize, even the Nuggets, they had to rebuild their roster and get off of Michael Porter Jr. and his $38 million a year in order to get Cam Johnson, who's making $21 million a year. There's a lot of teams around the league. Karl Anthony Towns making $60 million, He's a better player than Julius Randle. But look, the Minnesota Timberwolves said last year that we just can't do it. Have Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert on the roster with Karl, and then just hope it all works out even without any depth. And then they trade for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, and they basically have 8 starters, including Nickeil Alexander-Walker, all of last regular season when they were healthy in the playoffs. I think teams should have to think differently. And I think the reason why restricted free agency looks the way it looks for players, I think, Haize, in the previous CBA, they would all have multi-year deals by now.
Agreed.
And maybe they would have the money they're looking for, which is $25 to $30 to $40 million a year, because the penalties weren't so astronomical. And Haize, remember, there's the luxury tax penalty, there's the first apron, and there's the second apron. So when all 3 of those territories, they have different stipulations you have to cross and meet in order for those things to activate. But all of them, they all have bad penalties for the team. And if a team isn't competing for a championship, Haize, I think they find it really difficult in order to justify that. And not only competing for a championship, they got to believe the players they're worth paying a steep price for.
I agree with you wholeheartedly there. I think that this is a sign of, like, and with the, even like the Brooklyn Nets, they went out and drafted. I didn't think they would take all those draft picks that they did. They did. And a lot of those guys were guards too. So I think they're clearly already set up to kind of move in a different direction. As far as with the Kuminga thing, I think it just comes down to Steve Kerr is just not in on Jonathan Kuminga. I do think Kuminga could be a pretty productive player that can put up some numbers, but he has to play his way. And I think that's not the way that Kerr needs or wants him to play with the current roster that they have here. I'm honestly more surprised that the Warriors haven't went out and been more aggressive about moving on from him, because it's clear Steve Kerr doesn't believe in Jonathan Kuminga. It seems like maybe it's one of those things where maybe the front office is wanting to keep Kuminga around a little bit more than maybe Steve Kerr, just because eventually this thing is going to end with Dre and Jimmy and Steph, and they want to have some type of young piece that they can look at that point in time. And I don't think Kerr's going to stick around for a rebuild either. But if you're really in on this, let's try to win a title while Steph is still here and still playing as well as he is, Kuminga clearly doesn't fit. And he's now apparently like holding up their free agency. They still have to sign 4 players to just reach the minimum level of roster spots, Swipa. And that's held up, reportedly because of this Jonathan Kuminga thing. They're waiting on free agency because of that. And so they've already gone like through the first 3-4 waves of free agency. Now there's just like Al Horford's waiting there to re-sign with them potentially. And then other than that, they're going to be picking at the carcass left in free agency. So I get it that the new CBA, this is part of it. And this is how we're going to see it. I think we're going to see another wrinkle of this as it goes on, because when you have kind of bigger free agents that teams want a little bit more, imagine a team giving a player an offer sheet, knowing that the size of the offer sheet sends that team into the second tax apron. That's going to be something teams are going to have to watch out for. But this whole thing that we're seeing now is just an indication of how much flexibility it takes away from building your roster once you go into that second tax apron. And I think that's really indicative of what we're seeing with a lot of these restricted free agent deals.
Yeah, and I think, again, you have to really think multi-layered here for teams if you're the general manager, if you work in the front office. Because if you do decide to do that, again, just for context, y'all, one of the biggest reasons why the second apron is so scary is that your first round pick, which I believe is 7 years, maybe 8 years into the future, if you're in the second apron, then your first is frozen, meaning you're not allowed to trade that pick if you remain in the second apron over the course of the season. Then you're not allowed to require a player on sign and trade. You're not allowed to use any pre-existing trade exceptions. You can't aggregate contracts. Like you're not even allowed to sign and trade your own free agents if the salary exceeds the second apron. Like you're hamstrung. So from that standpoint, I think a lot of people, you have to rebuild your identity. And there is a path, I think, for example, the OKC Thunder. They just spent basically, I think, over $500 million on Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and J-Dub. But what they're going to do is they have movable contracts with Alex Caruso, who's making 20. They have Isaiah Hartenstein, who has a short-term contract that's also movable. AJ Mitchell has movable money. And then they have everybody else in their roster, from Kendrick Williams, eventually Cason Wallace. All of those players, they're going to have them at such low contracts and also low contracts on good players
Yeah.
that should they need to flip those players, plus the picks they have accumulated, they'll be able to do that to continue to stay underneath a certain threshold. I think the most they'll ever have to worry about is the first apron, but the second apron, they can skirt that in a lot of different creative ways. But you just want to maintain flexibility. And I think that's what your teams, the Houston Rockets, the Denver Nuggets, and the OKC Thunder, one of the things they all have in common is that they've all made upgrades to their roster in the last few years, but they have found a way to circumvent the first and second apron, especially in order to really stay competitive for the long term.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right on that one. Well, we're going to come off this. We're actually going to start talking about our sleepers in each conference. We're going to start off with the Eastern Conference, but first, we got to get into the message from Game Time. We've all been there, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to miss out on the show you've been dying to see. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets fast, easy, and affordable. Prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their last-minute deals. Plus, their zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. No more endless scrolling. You'll even get a panoramic seat view before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting. And the best part, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. We're locked on game night coming up next. All right, Swiper. So we're going to start off talking about sleepers. We're going to start off with the Eastern Conference. What team do you see as the biggest sleeper? Do you see multiple possible sleepers in the Eastern Conference next season?
So when you say sleeper, the maybe betting favorites, FanDuel favorites for the title?
Yeah, I think that's a fair, even way to look at it.
Well, I mean, my number one sleeper is probably going to be the Orlando Magic.
That's fair.
And I think there's two teams that are like the legit, like we're contenders in the Eastern Conference, which is the Cavs and the New York Knicks. My next one is going to be the Orlando Magic. Look, I just think that what they've done with the roster and adding Desmond Bain, who what's funny is I actually had to do like a little bit of some player eval and some rankings. Desmond Bain, for all the numbers that we typically care about, he had a better season than John Morant last year. He was a very consistent player, especially defensively, offers a lot of upside for them as like a ball handler, really good shooter on and off ball, has a lot of ability as a connected passer. I think he does a lot of really good things for a team. Look, they're going to start Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bain, Franz Wagner, and Paolo Banchero. They have two All-NBA worthy players possibly next year if they play enough games. I like Wendell Carter Jr. I think he's a really good starting center in this league. I think he offers a lot of defensive upside because of his size and strength. And he also can hit the mid-range shot, hit the three-pointer a little bit. They actually have, I think, one of the sneakiest situations in the NBA. And the reason they're a sleeper, Haize, I mean, if you look at the roster, their starting five's good. Anthony Black will be another year in his development. Tristan Da Silva will be another year in his development. Then you got Jonathan Isaac. Mo Wagner will be back this year. Jet Howard's still on the roster. They also added Tyus Jones. Look, they have about, I would say, 10 to 11 players that you can look at and say, with Goga Bitadze, who's still there, by the way, they have a bunch of players that you look at and say, look, we actually can put a 10 to 12-man rotation out in a regular season, and then come playoff time, they have a lot of flexibility. I actually think Paolo, Franz, and Desmond Bain will be the guaranteed every minute players they'll have. I think that Jalen Suggs continues to develop offensively, and if he stays healthy, I think he'll be another player to add to that list. And then now you can figure out small lineups with Desmond and him. You can figure out lineups where you're going really big with Franz and Paolo and Jonathan Isaac and Wendell Carter Jr. and Anthony Black. I mean, they're going to be able to have so much versatility. And I think in an Eastern Conference that honestly, it's just not the conference that we were used to last year. And on top of that, there's just not a lot of teams with high enough upside, I think, to absolutely shut the Magic up, man. There's a real world, Haize, where the Magic are in the Eastern Conference Finals next year, and it's them in Cleveland going bar for bar.
It definitely is. I agree with you. There is a real world in which that happens, and I love that pick. Orlando Magic are one of my favorite teams in the Eastern Conference. I know that the last season they didn't live up to the expectations. I think they made the right acquisition. I'm going to pick a different sleeper, and not to say that I think they're going to compete for maybe the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that they have taken their shot, and I do think they're going to be a difficult team and matchup for some teams, and that's the Atlanta Hawks. I really like what the Atlanta Hawks have done with their roster this offseason, going out and getting a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, which is exactly what they want as a big man out there playing with Trae Young. Getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker as another on-ball defender for them is going to be really good. Jalen Johnson being fully healthy, hopefully for a full season. And the draft pick of Asa Newell, I know the minutes are not going to be plentiful for him, at least to start off the season, but I can see his defensive upside and his ability to stretch the floor, get him on the court at some point in time. I like a lot of what they've done with this roster in Atlanta. I think that they've built a roster to kind of overcome some of Trae Young's shortcomings defensively, because you know Trae Young's going to be attacked. He's going to be targeted. He's going to be attacked on the defensive side of the ball. So there you need switchable defenders. You need rim protection. You need those type of things to kind of overcome what Trae's defensive limitations are. And I look at almost everybody on this roster. They all have some solid defensive ability, except for Trae, just about, that's going to be in the rotation. And then Risha, I know he didn't have the best rookie season. He did start coming along a little bit more towards the end there. And I think playing with a player like Kristaps Porzingis is going to help him kind of maybe unlock a little bit more in this game as well. I like this roster. I don't love it. I don't think they're going to go on some crazy Jimmy Butler-esque Eastern Conference run, but I do think this is a team that if you're slipping, and depending on the matchups, they can cause some matchup issues. They can maybe upset a team in the first round. I like this Atlanta Hawks roster a lot in what they've built here.
Yeah, I do too. One of the things that I keep running into, when I'm pulling some information, like I was looking up passing statistics in the NBA. I don't know if you know this, Haize, but Jalen Johnson, sneaky, one of the most, in terms of just like wings especially, he actually passes the ball a lot. He's one of the NBA leaders in passes per game. And I think when you have that kind of player on the roster and somebody that you can trust with the basketball, with Trae Young, to be able to create plays for others, that's willing to get up off the ball, continue to find a way for other people to get involved, I think this is going to be a really unique situation for the team. And I'm actually really excited to see how they continue to put it together, and how Jalen Johnson and Zachary Risha, especially as a wing duo, how they continue to figure that out as time goes on. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see how they continue to integrate some of their younger pieces, obviously the draft picks that they had this year. I want to see how Kristaps Porzingis ends up playing with this team, what his role is going to look like. Is he going to spend more time at the 5 than the 4? Onyeka Okongwu is another really good center in this league that has a lot of really valuable skill sets. I think he's a good defender. He also had a little mid-range to him. I think he's going to be another player that you want to see take another step. Muhammad Gueye off the bench is another prospect that they like, a big, long athlete. And then Asa Newell. So you got Kobe Bumpkin, you got Asa Newell, you got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Gueye coming off the bench. And then I don't know what they're going to do with their starting lineup. If they're going to start Zachary Risha and just put Kristaps at the 5, and then Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, and Trae Young. That might be what I would do, just to be able to really, truly maximize Trae Young and just give him 5 floor spacers. And then you give him one of the best cutter slashers in the NBA, and Jalen Johnson, Zachary Risha, really good off-ball shooter. They actually have defensive potential as well. Like Risha is a good defender. Jalen Johnson, a good defender. And now you got Nickeil Alexander-Walker and you got Dyson Daniels. Look out. Those non-Trae Young minutes where they put Dyson out there, they put Nickeil Alexander-Walker out there, and they got Jalen Johnson or Zachary Risha, and they got Onyeka Okongwu or Kristaps Porzingis. That's going to be a nightmare lineup to try to score on the interior. So I really love the pick for the Hawks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How do you feel about the Philadelphia 76ers heading into next year?
Yeah, man, I thought about this too, bro, but if they're healthy, they are. They don't have a lot of depth at their 4. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't know how big they are on their wings, but in terms of a healthy Embiid, a healthy Maxey, a healthy Paul George, then yeah, they're a sleepy contender as well.
Okay. All right. Well, next up, that's it on the Eastern Conference. Next up, we're going to be switching gears and go over to the West right after this. All right, Swiper, last topic of the day, sleepers, Western Conference this time. Who you got in the West?
Well, real quick, do you think Detroit will qualify as a sleeper?
Ooh, I like that pick of Detroit. I like that pick a lot, especially with Jaden Ivey being fully healthy. Hopefully, I like that pick of Detroit.
Okay. Well, sleepers, I think my number one sleeper in the West is the Wolves. I think they've been forgotten about a little bit. Like, the Rockets made a whole bunch of noise this offseason with the Kevin Durant signing, and then on top of that, getting Dorian Finney-Smith, the Nuggets, Cam Johnson, and Jonas Valanciunas, and Tim Hardaway, and Bruce Brown. But I look at the Wolves. Remember, it's like last year, the Wolves from January 1st on, they were a top 5 defense and offense in the regular season. And then they went to the playoff. They absolutely drum rolled the LA Lakers. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. took a real step as the year went on. And now in Summer League, he looks like a player that's more confident, more sure of their game, and also had a better understanding of NBA basketball. You add him in as a replacement for Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the rotation, and now you got Dante DiVincenzo, you got Naz Reid, you got Rob Dillingham, and you have Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark. They actually have a good team, and I think they have a team that actually can get some stuff done in the West, potentially make the NBA Finals. Now, the top of the West is really heavy, but I think those Wolves, man, with Anthony Edwards, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, completely shocked if they were able to make a run out of the West.
I like the Wolves pick. I think the Wolves pick makes the most sense. That is the team that you look at. Like, they've just been a tough team. They turn it on at the right time almost every single time. I like a lot of I think they're going to have players step up this season. And I think they're going to need that as well. Like, Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to have a huge opportunity this year. Dante DiVincenzo is hopefully going to have a better year than what he had last year. I love the fact that they kept Naz Reid and Julius Randle on that team. So I love that pick. I like that pick a lot of the Wolves. And just for the interest of the conversation, I'm going to go a different route with my sleeper in the Western Conference. And I thought one of us would pick the Wolves, so I had already prepared a different one. How do you feel about the Golden State Warriors and the legitimate chance to make a run in the playoffs?
Man. Now, that one's tough because with Jimmy Butler, they were one of the best teams in the NBA. And then in the playoffs, they were actually playing really well before he went down versus Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Steph Curry, Brandon Podziemski, Buddy Hield, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green. They have Santos, Jonathan Kuminga, Trey Jackson Davis, and then they got Moses Moody, and then Quentin Post as well. I mean, I could see them pushing for the West, but man, like the Clippers, I think will give them real issues. The Rockets will give them real issues this year. I don't think they're beating the Nuggets. I don't think they're beating OKC. I can see a path where they can make the conference finals if things break right in the schedule. I could see a path in which, like, they're competing to make the conference finals, but I don't know, man. Like a 38-year-old, I think Steph Curry by the time we get to that point as well, that's tough, bro. That's really tough.
And the thing is, like, they looked good in the playoffs last year, and then Steph went down, but they had their moments, but they've also had their moments where they have looked old, and with a lot of the top teams in the Western Conference can get out and run. I think matchup is going to have to be the most important thing for the Warriors. How do those matchups shape up for them by the time you get to the playoffs? And also how they fill out the rest of the bench. We just talked about. They got a lot of roster spots open. They still got a lot that they need to decide to do on their roster. And this held up with this Kuminga thing. I think how they fill out, like, if they do move on from Kuminga, which probably is likely, how they fill out the rest of that bench is going to be hugely important, who and what they can be next season. I don't know, man. Like, some part of me just doesn't want to bet against Steph, Dre, and with Steve Kerr coaching that they can at least go on some type of run, like you said, maybe to the Western Conference Finals. But then again, like, you look at the top teams in the West, the Nuggets, the Rockets, of course, the Thunder. Like, these are all teams that are going to be so much better, and the depth is going to be able to give the Warriors so much problem. And the Warriors are an old team. But I think, like, the one thing that I hope we kind of see, because I think they're two of the older teams in the league, is a playoff matchup with the Clippers and the Warriors. I just want to see those two old teams go up against each other. So
yeah, that would be a fun series, especially how they ended the season last year.
Yeah,
that was a knife fight. Look, like I said, Steph Curry, he's going to turn 38 on March 5th, 14th of next year. You know, as a millennial, that's not old in real life, but that's definitely old in the NBA. That's a lot. And then, Jimmy Butler's mid-30s, Draymond Green's mid-30s, and then you just kind of surround them with like a bunch of kids and whatnot. I don't know. That's tough. I think they'll have a pathway to do it, but I wouldn't bet on them doing it. Now, if I said the Lakers, Is that a sleeper for you? But or they have LeBron and Luka, so they shouldn't be considered a sleeper, but they're not necessarily. You don't necessarily trust that they're good enough to be a tier 1 contender.
Yeah, I think that would be considered a sleeper for me, just because, like you said, like they're good, but I don't think they're in tier 1. I don't think that you pick them to be that most people would pick them to be a favorite to come out of the East. So I think they would be considered a sleeper. I think like they've done a good enough job as what they probably could with the flexibility they had to kind of build the roster better around Luka's skill set, but they still need a lot. They still need a lot. That's a lot of questions still with that team. You're muted.
My starting lineup for them is Luka Doncic, Marcus Smart, Austin Reeves, LeBron, and DeAndre Ayton. And then off the bench, they would have Gabe Vincent. They would have Bronny James, Dalton Knecht, Jared Vanderbilt, Jackson Hayes. And I think that's what their bench would be in total.
Yeah.
Man, that's just that's tough.
That's tough.
I mean, that's not great. Not great depth. I don't even think that's a top 3 starting lineup in the Western Conference either. But look, if Luka could shoot you like into a series, like, you know what I mean? He could score himself and score the team, will the team into a great series. So I do think they can still make a lot of noise. I think DeAndre Ayton is a good ad. Marcus Smart's a good ad. I think their defensive infrastructure is better today than it was 3 weeks ago. But even then, being able to not have a lot of people you can trust to come off the bench and do work, man, that's still a lot. But I have to put them in sleeper though because they got Luka and Bron.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anything left, Swipe, before we get up out of here?
Man, nah, bro. I mean, I don't think there's that many sleepers. I think in the Eastern Conference, man, like, are the Knicks and Cleveland, those your certified like 2 contenders?
Yeah, I think
the
so.
conference.
Yeah. With Orlando, I would agree. Orlando's right below them, which they could pass them up depending on how that team comes together. So,
all right, wait, hold on. Last thing. So, Kobe White, Matzes, Josh, Booch. Could you see them like if they get hot like they did in March, and everything's kind of rolling? Could you see them pushing for like a top 4 or 5 seed next year?
No, I don't think they're ready for that. I'd have to see. They'd have to really play an entire season how hot they finished. I don't know if they have that in. They've added some point of attack defenders, but just in fairness, I don't see them competing for a top 4 or 5 seed. I see them being better than last year. They won 39 games last year. I think they can get to 40, 41 potentially, maybe get up to the 7th seed, 8th seed, maybe, depending on how things shake out with injuries and stuff. But I think they're still going to have a tough go next season as well.
All right. Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
Well, we want to thank y'all for tuning in, man. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Locked On NBA is free and available in every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube, the Odyssey app, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, basically anywhere you want to listen to Locked On NBA, you can. Y'all go support Swiper over on Locked On Nuggets as well, and I'm over on Locked On Bulls. We'll see you guys on Friday again next Friday, man. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.